Good evening. I'm Supreet Kaur Saluja, Chief Strategic Partnerships and New Ventures Officer at Girl Scouts of the USA. And I'm so excited to be with you this evening and to welcome you to this Campfire Chat, taking charge of your well-being. This is being presented in collaboration with Aetna, a CVS Health company, and a respected and trusted leader in behavioral health. We are grateful to our friends at Aetna for inviting Girl Scouts of the USA to partner on a wellness, awareness, and education campaign and for sponsoring this event. Together, we're honoring Mental Health Awareness Month and equipping women with resources and tools for self-care and the care of loved ones. As we all know, this is a particularly challenging time for working women, especially those who are juggling job responsibilities, childcare, homeschool, and/or caregiving for elders in their family. On behalf of the 50 million Girl Scout alum across the country, many of whom face these challenges every day, we thank Aetna for their continued support. This particular Campfire Chat was created by the Girl Scout Network, a growing community of women, both alums who want to stay connected and extend their powerful Girl Scout experience well into adulthood, and supporters who deeply believe in our mission of lifting up girls. During our Campfire Chats, successful women share their stories to educate and inspire. Tonight, every single one of the inspirational women on our panel is a Girl Scout alum, and we're so proud of each and every one of them. One more thing before we get started. We'll be moderating the chat log and sharing your questions for the panelists, so don't be afraid to ask away. And if you're inclined to share what you've learned, please tag in your social posts with #CampfireChats and @GirlScouts. To watch this event with live captioning, follow the link in the chat. And now I'd like to introduce Cheryl Burke, Senior Vice President of Cross Enterprise Strategic Innovation at Aetna. Welcome, Cheryl.
Thank you, Supreet. I'm especially pleased to be introducing this particular event because I know it's been a year filled with trauma, loss, and isolation for so many around the world. And we at Aetna are proud to partner with Girl Scouts to help provide information and resources that support women during such a challenging time. Prolonged stress due to the COVID-19 pandemic has caused most Americans' mental health to decline in the past year, and women have been especially impacted. Our recent survey found that 6 in 10 women say the pandemic has had a negative impact on their overall levels of stress, and nearly half say they are experiencing significantly more or somewhat more stress compared to this time last year. In addition, 9.8 million working mothers in the US are suffering from workplace burnout, and a third are considering leaving the workforce or downshifting their careers. Working moms feel abandoned and betrayed by society, often faced with a right choice trap between taking care of family and work obligations or being forced to put their own mental and physical health needs on the back burner. And it's not just working mothers. Women who aren't moms feel extra stress from work, relationships, caregiving, and more. Women want to take control of their mental well-being, but 42% agree they need help navigating the complex mental health care system or identifying a mental health care diagnosis. In addition to this partnership with Girl Scouts of the USA, Aetna has a variety of free resources that are available to women, whether they have Aetna health insurance coverage or not. We're sharing online tools such as digital anxiety and depression checks with the public. American adults agree that their mental health would benefit from more open conversations about mental health with friends, with families, and with colleagues. And that's why we're here today, to initiate that conversation, to start that dialogue. And now, I'm thrilled to introduce you to the moderator of our panel discussion, Girl Scout alum Kate Snow, Senior National Correspondent for NBC News.
All right. Hi, Cheryl. Thank you so much. I'm Kate, and I am so excited to be here with all of you tonight. I think this is going to be a really fascinating conversation. I'm looking forward to it myself, this campfire chat that we're having about women and wellness and a whole bunch of topics. We're going to talk for a little while, and then you can add your questions. We'll gladly take questions. Let me introduce the panel to you one by one. It is a stellar panel. So first up, we have Deepika Chopra, who is known better as the Optimism Doctor. She's the founder of Things Are Looking Up, She's all over YouTube. She's all over with videos, so you may know her already. Second up on our panel is Dr. Pooja Lakshmin. She's a psychiatrist and a writer for the New York Times, a contributor in the parenting section. She's also the author of an upcoming book called Empowered: Free Yourself from the Tyranny of Self-Care and Build True Well-Being. And then lastly, we have Dr. Deborah Fernandez-Turner, who is a psychiatrist and medical director for Aetna, which of course is one of the sponsors here tonight. So I thought that we could start, ladies, with just each of us giving a quick description of how we're connected to Girl Scouts and maybe just a little bit about what our year was like during COVID. I'll start us off. I was a Girl Scout in the 1980s. Long time ago. My mom was my troop leader. And then fast forward, I became the troop leader for my daughter when we moved to a new town, and she was a third grader and there were no Girl Scout troops. Somebody said, well, you can just start one. So I did. And we were a troop for 7 years. And I'm really proud that up until 9th grade last year, we were going. And then the COVID pandemic, to be honest with you, is what decimated our little troop, because we just couldn't. The virtual meetings were too hard and the girls were 9th graders, and so we kind of collapsed. But before that, they got their silver awards, which I'm like super, super proud of. So that's my story. The past year, I have been doing, NBC reporting in my kitchen, doing Zoom interviews, and in my basement below me, I have a studio that they brought in that I use to anchor nightly news. So it has been just really strange. Let me call on Deepika first.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Deepika Chopra. Like Kate said, I'm an optimism doctor and a visual imagery expert. I study the science behind optimism and resiliency. I am also a Girl Scout alum. I'm so excited and proud to share that I was part of Troop 551 out here in Southern California, and we even had our own little song. We loved walking in our neighborhood, and we would walk in with each other, and we would say, we are Troop 551, walking is our greatest fun. And I was a Brownie and a Girl Scout, and I just have the fondest memories of being a Girl Scout. Unfortunately, I do not have a daughter. I have 2 boys right now, so I would love to be more involved with Girl Scouts, and so I'm so happy to be here with all of you guys and doing this. It's really something that is close to my heart. This past year plus, has been really interesting. It's been a lot of really, really low lows and actually quite a few high highs as well. And so I'm proud to say that my husband and I and my 2 kids, well, my littlest one is 7 months, so he came in the middle of the pandemic. We have a pandemic baby. But my almost 4-year-old husband and I have eaten every meal together, for the last 12 plus months. And that was something that we were never really able to do before. So that has been a little bit of a silver lining, but to be honest, it's been really hard. We both work full time, like so many people out there. And in the same time, actually, we are very fortunate. Our jobs really increased during this time. And I know that's not the same for everyone, but we also lost any form of childcare, period. And it's been a struggle. I do a lot of teaching workshops to Fortune 500 companies, and I've had my son, throwing various articles of clothing at my face while I'm teaching optimism to 8,000 people. I work from my bedroom. One time recently, I will share that I forgot to change. I left it as the last thing to do. I did all the breakfast for the kids and came back up here just recently, and I said, I'm going to change out of my robe as the last thing I do right before I come on, because I don't want to get my clothes dirty. And about 2 minutes into speaking and teaching my workshop, I looked back at myself and realized I was still in my robe. So
Happens.
Yeah, so everything, that's been the motto.
Yeah, it happens. Pooja, you want to go next?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's such a pleasure to be here with all of you ladies. Thank you so much, Kate, for the wonderful introduction. So I actually was a Brownie in Reading, Pennsylvania growing up. And it's so funny. I got a message this afternoon from my 2nd grade teacher, who actually is watching tonight and is a Girl Scout alum and a mom of a Girl Scout, Mrs. Mahone, if you're listening in. I thought that that was so amazing. But yeah, so, I think it's just so wonderful. Obviously, Girl Scouts is such an uplifting and empowering organization for young women to be part of. So this past year for me in the pandemic was definitely one of, like Deepika was saying, a lot of low lows and high highs, in that it really solidified for me what I wanted to do for my career and also for my family. My partner and I we're part of the pandemic exodus from all of the East Coast cities. So we moved from Washington, D.C. to Austin, Texas, and we're trying to start a family right now, which is its own, can be a difficult process. And so a lot of movement in personal areas, but then really seeing my patients obviously struggling. I'm a psychiatrist. I specialize in women's mental health. Many of my patients over this past year were pregnant or postpartum during the pandemic. And then I do a lot on social media. So I'm on Instagram at Women's Mental Health Doc. So I'm educating, and I'm just hearing from so many women across the country about how they've been struggling and how kind of the solution that we're going to get into talking about. But self-care it's an empty promise, right? It's an empty promise when you don't have time to change out of your robe, right? Like it's, and so I've been working on this book, which will be coming out in 2023, because books take a really long time. But, I think that it's going to be a really powerful conversation that we have tonight. And I think, my goal for today is really to just have all of the women that are listening in tonight just recognize that there's no reason to feel guilt. There's no reason to feel shame right now, because we're all in the same boat and we're struggling. And I think like transparency is just so important, because it's been an incredibly rough year for everybody.
Yeah. Deborah, go for it.
All right. Well, I'm Deborah Fernandez-Turner, and I'm a medical director with Aetna. I was a Brownie many years ago in Staten Island, New York. But probably the most interaction I've had with Girl Scouts actually has been with my children. So I have 2 adults, and they both went through many years with Girl Scouts, and it really was transformative for them, and in many ways for me as well as a mom. So connecting with the other moms within Girl Scouts, connecting with troop leaders, and watching my kids develop skills that I as a mom couldn't necessarily teach them by myself. Watching them learn how to become an entrepreneur if they wanted to, learn how to interact in difficult situations, how to earn those badges, all of those things were incredible lessons that alone I would not have been able to give to my kids. So Girl Scouts is an incredible organization that has done a tremendous amount for my family, and that I'm incredibly grateful for. This year, same thing, lots of exciting and wonderful things and lots of really tough times. In this last year, well, I've been working from home for about 4 years now, thanks to my wonderful job at Aetna. And so for me, it wasn't much of a personal transition. My life was essentially work-wise the same. However, I had one kid who was going to graduate school. I had another kid who was supposed to start college, and both of them did their first years in each of those programs in my house. So yeah, in some respects, it was a bonus year. Those are years, this is a year that both of my kids should have been gone, but I'm grateful to have been able to spend that time with them. And at the same time, I'm really sorry that they missed out on the opportunities that they otherwise should have gotten. A master's in economics should be done at school. Your first year in art school in Chicago should be done in Chicago. So, so lots of pluses and minuses and challenges.
Yeah, and both things are true, right?
Mm-hmm, exactly.
I should mention I have 2 teenagers, so if you hear them yelling in the background, and I'm from upstate New York. I didn't say where I was a Girl Scout. The 518. Anybody out there? Shout out. Okay, so I did my first story last April about moms, specifically about moms and mental health, and how women were struggling and women were feeling stressed and just at the end of their tether and drinking more than they used to, and all these things that you all know on the panel. So Deepika, I want to go to you first, because you're the optimism doctor, and you just described what happened to your own family and having no child care. Are you still optimistic?
So, this last year plus has been very humbling. I think that first and foremost, before I even discuss my answer to that, I have to define what optimism really is. And so I think a lot of times we think that optimism, we hear that word and we really deeply associate it with the idea of positivity. And I think people are often really, really surprised that they hear someone that studies optimism, an optimism doctor. I don't really define optimism with the word positivity. I actually, like, the first two words that come to mind to me when I think of optimism are resiliency and curiosity. And so a true optimist is someone that, like, very much so is mindful of the struggles and the setbacks and the less than ideal situations and the things that aren't really going their way, but they see them as temporary and something that they have the ability to overcome, even if they don't know how or exactly when, but they know that they can. So it's really about this idea of relying upon our strengths. And so I always like to share with this year that we all have gone through a collective period of trauma, but we also have gone through a collective period of resiliency building. And so all of us are coming out of this situation, and we're still not truly out of it, but starting to come out of this situation with a lot of skills and surpassing limits that we never really knew we could. And so I'm really focused, like when the new year hit and everybody was just like so ready for 2020 to be over, and then sort of had this like very hard reality that 2021 at the beginning of it was just looking a lot like 2020. And I think that a lot of people focus their new year on this idea of intentions and sort of like resolutions. But I actually always have talked about using the new year as a time to reflect on the past year of all the things you've overcome. And so for me, when I sit in that, I feel that I have actually increased my optimism this year because I have literally done things that I would say before that I could not do. And I think all of us have. We've gotten to this point, and for 2020, we survived all of our extremely hardest days and struggles. We did that. And so I like to look at optimism, and especially over this past 12 plus months, with sort of this curiosity of how did I grow? There were definitely times, even for myself as an optimism doctor, I talk about I'm not the most optimistic person. I'm nobody's guru. I know that I'm really good at what I do, and I know the science behind it. I know how to help people increase their optimism factors, and it's a muscle. But I'm also a human, very transparently sharing my journey and how to increase my own optimism, and sharing like the times that I feel greatly pessimistic. Having a baby during this time was really tough. Having, again, no childcare, and I think we all have really started to see one thing that's come out of this is how much invisible work women do. I think like it was really hard not to turn a blind eye this year because everyone was at home. It was right there in front of our partners, in front of our kids, in front of anyone that was in our life, how much invisible sort of unpaid labor, extra work that we do as women all day long, and it really adds up. And in the end of it, no matter your kids, I know for me, like I said, I think I had a really tough age group during this time, which was 3-year-old and an infant.
That's my dog. I'm sorry.
There, even if my partner was working in a different room and I'm working at home, my toddler was always going to come and ask me all the questions that he needed, or if the mustard wasn't right on his sandwich, whatever it was, or he only wanted me to change him. I think like we often like it no more is that idea under a veil. Like everyone is very aware now of something that's been going on for a really, really long time, and it needs solutions because we've reached a breaking point really badly.
Yeah, Pooja, it's not always even, right? To put it politely, like I know in my life, there's a lot more on me in terms of organizing the kids' lives than on my partner. And maybe some of it is because I do it to myself. But I think a lot of women feel an imbalance there, having much more of the home life on them, in addition to working, whether inside or outside of the home. So how have we I'll put this to Pooja or whoever wants to take it. How have we changed during this pandemic? Like, do you see this conversation now, because of what Deepika just said, getting more attention, and maybe things will shift after this period of pandemic?
So I am optimistic that I think really this past year has kind of blown the lid off the mental load, this invisible labor, right? There's so much more research. Actually, there's an amazing graduate student at Harvard right now, Allison Daminger, who is doing a lot of work looking at invisible labor and the mental load. And study after study is showing us that it is not equitable. Once children come into the picture in same-sex couples, even as well, the person who makes more money is going to end up working outside the home. And in different sex couples, often it's the women, the moms, who are the ones that are taking on this invisible labor. And so I think these conversations are happening a lot more often now. And my patients, like what I'm seeing in my practice, is you're realizing, and this is something that I've been writing about over this past year for the Times, there's no right choice. There's no way to make the perfect decision when you're faced between having to take care of your own mental health versus having to make difficult choices about your finances versus your kids' school versus, healthcare decisions. Like, I think the fallacy or the illusion that there is one perfect solution or that there's one right answer, people are seeing, women are seeing, and men are seeing, households are seeing that this isn't possible. That's not the way that our system is set up. The support is not there. The structure is not there. And I think, my soapbox is always around self-care, because I think that self-care is something that gets sold to women as sort of like the magic bullet, the solution that's going to fix everything. And in my practice, I just see women who come in and they're burnt out, they're overwhelmed, they have no time, they're not sleeping, right? And they're like, but then I feel bad, like it's my fault because I never learned how to meditate. And if I were, I have this meditation app and I should be able to use it, but I have no time to use it. I have no time to go to yoga, right? And then they feel guilty and they feel ashamed, like it's their fault. And it's like, look, this isn't your fault. The system is not set up for you to be a superhero here. So I think a big piece of, for me, like, real self-care is actually the internal work. It's learning how to set those boundaries.
And just as you're saying that, someone sent in a question that says, how do you not feel guilty taking time for yourself? I never feel like I can take a mental break or some me time without feeling guilty. I feel like I shouldn't take time because it takes me away from doing things for my family. And then when my spouse has time, this is what someone posted in the chat, I then become resentful. I don't like that resentment and that guilt.
Totally. I love that question because I get it all the time. And the thing is that I think for women, guilt is like the faulty check engine light. It is always there. No matter what choice you make, you're going to feel guilty. So what you need to do is you need to learn how to actually get comfortable with still making healthy choices for yourself, even though you feel guilty. Like learning how to turn the volume down a little bit, but not letting guilt power all of your decisions.
Yeah, and I think also like working the true work, exactly what Pooja was saying, is really about, because a lot of my clients and myself talk about this. Like I myself ask myself this question all the time. But a lot of it is really like actually doing the work to shift your mindset on sort of not allowing, because that's what we are on autopilot. It is that like sort of that guilt just comes up. But I always like to talk about also, I think another issue that's really big is I really don't like the word balance. And I think women are constantly, especially moms, seeking because someone told them that they could do it all and it's just about balancing. And it really is a word that I think, and a notion that is like more associated with shame and guilt and failure than it really is associated with anything else. And so I always like to replace that B word. I don't even like saying it, just chuck it out, because like we don't even know what balance is. There's no way, it's completely arbitrary. And it's sort of, we're never gonna get it because we never are gonna be good enough at it, whatever that is. And so I like to chuck that out. And I really like to focus on a different B word, and it's boundaries. So we can all start to work on creating boundaries. And sometimes it's not just boundaries from people or other people, or even like the things that we consume, you know, whether that's food, whether that's social media, whether that's the type of articles we read, the stuff around us, everything is a consumption. But really, truly, sometimes it's about creating boundaries from our own self. So, or with ourselves. And so really like measurable boundary setting, focusing more sort of on that than this completely arbitrary notion of perfection and balance. And I just really don't like that, especially, and it's usually women telling other women, you just have to create this balance and talk about self-care. You know, if I'm asked one more time by a publication what my morning routine is, and, you know, like reading another 12-step, sounds amazing, beautiful morning routine that is like, you know, goes, you know, really into detail of self-care, which I'm all for. I mean, this is literally, I studied the science behind rituals and positive morning rituals, but I like to really just tell people that most of us are really busy and we can't do that. And looking at that or reading that makes us feel shameful. And so really picking one or two things that are your non-negotiables that take less than 3 minutes to do, that don't require anything other than yourself. And whatever those, anything extra is a bonus. It's a cherry on top. And if you can do that, wonderful. But I've started now to let go of this, like I have to have 20 minutes to meditate, or, you know, get my hour massage if I can. I just like, if I can steal 3 minutes, 3 to 5 times a day, 3 minutes at a time to do something like turn on music and have a solo dance party, or, you know, do a quick mask, or just sit down and stare at a blank wall and literally, like, this is something I do. It may look absolutely nuts, but it helps my brain. Look at a blank wall and try to literally do nothing, or even watch 2 minutes of television or whatever it is. 3 minutes. Every busy person has 3 minutes in the day to breathe, to do anything that makes them feel good. My motto is, if it brings you joy and makes you feel good and it doesn't harm you or anyone else, please do more of it. It is not overkill. It's not selfish. It's actually positive survival.
Yeah, I want to get Deborah in the conversation. So Deborah, you work with Aetna, you work with a giant company.
I do.
I'm curious to go back to the workplace issues that we mentioned a few minutes ago. In this moment now, when we're all, a lot of offices are going back in, I mean, a lot of people have been working the whole time, frankly, people who are more essential workers or don't have the luxury of working from home. What can we say to our bosses, our managers, to try to help with some of what we've been talking about? And I'm not going to use the B word, but, you know, getting a better system in place, or helping take some of the weight off of women.
Absolutely. You know, it really goes back to what both Deepika and Pooja were saying. It goes to clarity. It goes to the fact that really the veneer of this strength is gone. You know, everybody is in our houses every day, all day long. You know, this is my office. This is where I am. And so they're hearing my dog bark. They're hearing my kids have an argument. They're hearing all of these things go on that are normal life, right? So because that veneer is blown off, we have this unique opportunity to be really clear about our needs as women in the workplace. So having conversations with your manager around what your needs are, what's going on at home, and how you're going to successfully get the job done, but at the same time have your needs met, and not being apologetic about that. You know, how many women especially go into the workplace and apologize for asking for what they need, or for setting boundaries at work.
How do you start that conversation, Deborah? How do you go? Because I think that's really hard for a lot of women, myself included, to go to your manager and be like, I just want to talk to you about life.
Exactly. It is a hard conversation, and it's incredibly anxiety provoking. Hopefully, you know, I'm fortunate. Aetna and CVS Health have been very clear from day one. Safety, your family come first. We get it. That's where your priority has to be, and we will be as flexible as we can be given the work. Of course, being such a big company, we have people that do almost everything. So, so we did have frontline workers in our pharmacy stores, pharmacists, pharmacy techs, retail stores that have had to be there. But most of the rest of us have been at home this whole time with the full support of our managers and supervisors. And along with that, you know, it was just the expectation from the top down, from Cheryl, straight down to everybody else, that that it was to be understood that your family came first. So I think that sort of best in class work from a company as large as CVS Health will hopefully move the needle for all the other companies out there that may be struggling. And then if it comes from the top, it's easier to step in and have that conversation with your manager to say, okay, I have a 3-year-old and a 7-year-old, and this is really hard. So I need to take some time to help my kid take a nap at this time, or whatever the need may be as clear, as specific as you can, be as honest as you can, and don't be afraid to say what you need. If you don't ask, you're not going to get it. So yes, it's incredibly anxiety provoking. I think we've all seen peers or had the experience of going in and having those conversations and having it not go so well. And having it maybe impact promotions or impact your ability to move forward in your company. And at the same time, I think there has been a cultural shift. Things are changing where the expectations, hopefully, are going to be different, and there will be more support for women in the workplace as a whole.
If I could add
Pooja,
one little thing to that,
yeah,
just in terms of
Molly,
some
you
of
start
the
writing a book about a lot of this.
Well, I was just going to say, in terms of if you're somebody who's listening and you know that you want to say something to your manager or to your boss and you're worried about it, one strategy too is to practice. You know, if you have a trusted friend or colleague that you really trust, you know, practice having the conversation, or even do some journaling around, like, here are the things that, oh, your dog is just so cute, Kate. You know, kind of making a list of, like, here are some potential solutions, or here's some ways that I could probably, like, this is what I need, here's some potential solutions. Like, give yourself the chance to put it out on paper or to practice with a friend. I think for so many women over this past year, our nervous systems have been living in a state of fight or flight. And when you're in fight or flight, it's really difficult to plan or think strategically. And so for these kind of conversations around what can change, what do I need to change, you need to be in an environment, if there's a way for you to get away from the chaos of your family for an hour to think through some of this, so you can actually feel a little bit more clear, like you were saying, Deborah, like getting some of that clarity to talk to somebody and to maybe do some journaling or things like that, so you can actually go into that meeting and be able to make a clear ask. I think that can be really helpful.
On the subject of work, someone just asked, flex time is great, but how do we get the work done without logging back on at 10 p.m.? Sleep still needs to happen. I've heard that from a lot of women too, that you know, you're trying to take care of the kids and get dinner ready and all that, and then you're going back on and staying up till midnight, 1 in the morning. How do you manage? Who wants to take that?
You know, from CVS Health and for Aetna perspective, you know, our teams have been incredibly supportive of each other. So the individuals on our teams that have younger kids have partners that they work with to support each other, so that in those moments when things are just really hard, they will literally cover for each other. And it's that solid team building is really important in the way a lot of people get through. And having those honest conversations with your supervisors around, this isn't working, this is why, this is what I need. Because you're right, you can't work 24/7, and you have kids that you have to take care of, and maybe they have to be in school and you have to be their teacher, and you have to make sure they have good meals, and you know, and. So being really clear, having those conversations, and understanding that your work is valuable, and that any company would rather support, well, I shouldn't say any, but most companies would rather support you through this difficult time and meet your needs now, rather than having to retrain somebody in 2 months or 3 months after you've polished up your resume and you've moved to someplace else that is more supportive of your needs.
I would also add like a little bit with that. I think that's so important, and that's incredible of the place that you work. Like, to have that community and support is unbelievable, and that's how it should be. I think also it's a great time to start, if you have a partner, not everybody does, but a partner that is raising your children as well. It's a really great time to have an honest, open conversation and reassess things. There's a good friend of mine who was on my podcast and writes a lot about this. Her name's Eve Brodsky, and she has a book called Fair Play, and she's got like a whole system in how to talk to your partner in sort of managing childcare, invisible work, and being able to do your actual work. And so leaning on each other more, it's a great time to create the space to actually just reassess things and start over. That maybe the process that you had before isn't really working anymore, and hopefully you're in a partnership where you guys can continuously have a talk to reassess things and create a new process.
I'm looking down, guys, because I'm seeing all these great questions pop in. So I'm not being rude. I'm just trying to see what people are saying. So somebody asked, do you have advice for those facing hostile working environments now that returning from working from home to now returning to a company office? I think what their point is that I know I've heard in my company, a lot of women are reluctant now to go back full time. I mean, myself included, I used to travel every single week. And this past year I haven't, and I've been around for my kids' high school years, and it feels hard to go back into the office now. So any advice, I guess the question is about a hostile work environment when you don't have a really sympathetic employer.
I'll jump in. I could jump in. You know, it's a really excellent and very, very difficult question. You know, we know from data that having a supportive manager is one of the most important things to preventing burnout. If you really feel like your work environment isn't supportive, it might be time to brush up that resume and reconsider where you are. Your work is valuable, you are valuable, and putting up with a hostile, negative, honestly abusive environment is not something that anybody has to tolerate. So your worth is much more than that. So it's really important to remember your worth and take ownership of that. And don't just accept that your work environment should be a hostile environment. And of course, many companies have means of dealing with those sorts of situations. So if you're in a larger organization, you can call your HR department and you can get in touch with higher level management and try to work through those channels to make things better. If that is not really an option for you, it's a smaller company, it may be time to look elsewhere.
Let's talk a little bit. Go ahead.
Okay, I was just gonna say that, and I think one thing too is if you're finding yourself in a hostile environment and you know that things aren't working, just remembering that you're not stuck there as well. And so even though it might take some time to make that move, and potentially for financial reasons or personal reasons, or you know, whatever's going on in your family life, it might not be possible right this minute or even this year, but if you're looking towards the future and knowing that I'm not going to be staying in this bad environment for the long run, that can help you feel a little bit more hopeful or, you know, resilient.
Exactly. Creating that exit plan can make a really big difference.
Exactly.
You guys have all touched on self-care, taking care of yourself. I know a lot of experts have said to me, you know, put your oxygen mask on first before you care for others. But people are asking questions about caring for others and how, maybe I can put this to Deepika, to you, the idea of trying to manage your own life, but then also having children with needs or maybe parents with needs, especially now after this pandemic. What's your best advice? I'll read you one of the comments. Somebody says, my daughter that just graduated from college struggles with anxiety and depression, does not sleep well or much at night. So that's a very real, tangible situation. How do you care for others when you feel spent?
I think that's such a great question, because I think so many of us are actually feeling that on a very intense level, you know, over this past year, and even myself included. So I think it's really important to actually be realistic about what self-care looks like right now. And it might look really different than it did over a year ago. I know, again, for me, I have small children, and so caring for them, not caring for them is not an option, and nor is that something I want to do, but they need a lot right now. You know, like I don't have kids that can just be left alone. They're the age group that they constantly, during the time they're awake, need somebody with them. And so my self-care is looking completely different than it looked, you know, when they had well, my baby was just born, but my older son had, you know, someone else to look out for him while I could do work and do something else and do a little bit of self-care. So I go back to that idea of being open and flexible and just being real and authentic. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that, you know, self-care is really important and you have to do it exactly how you were doing it before, and you need to take that hour out of your day. Like, to be realistic, a lot of us don't have that at all, and we're not going to, and that's, again, just setting ourselves up for failure. So it's about like really stealing those really little moments, like I said, 3 minutes, you know, and understanding that there is no time that's too small to practice an act of self-care. And so it's really redefining what that is and sort of grabbing those moments intentionally where you can and making sure you get them, but, you know, having your expectations of what that's going to look like be different. It's, again, having those conversations with whoever is in your house. A lot of us don't have another person, but if you do, or family members, it's time to ask for help. I know that was something that was really hard for me, and I've had to really ask for a lot of help this year, especially because, you know, the only help that our help circle was really small. It was who's in your pod, you know, and there was that risk aspect of it where it really was only who's with you and who can stay in with you and who's, you know, like safe. And so getting more comfortable with those type of things. And I like to keep it really real for people and don't expect that you can do that 12-step self-care. Maybe at someday you can, and that will be great, but it's still important to take those moments right now. And urging, I think, for that particular question, you know, there's a certain point where when we do have children that need care or support, like someone that is going through anxiety or insomnia, that there's the amount that you can do, and then there is a certain point where it is really important to seek help outside. And however you can be supportive, I think the best way you can be supportive of anybody else is to have empathy and to listen. I think a lot of times we believe that we need to fix everything. And actually, people that are seeking our help are usually just looking for someone to listen to them and validate their authentic feelings and not put a positive bumper sticker over it, like good vibes only. And that's a whole nother thing that I talk a lot about, which is toxic positivity. But anyway, so hopefully it answered it in some way, but it's really about redefining what self-care can be for you right now and sort of where are the times you can fit them in, and not judging how little or how much that time is, just taking what you can and making the most of that small amount. I call them micro moments. So really figuring out the micro moments.
Yeah. Pooja, I know that you do perinatal psychiatry, right? Which is so pregnancy and right around childbirth. And I'm thinking of young moms who get together in new mom groups, right? That's like a lot of us have done that or found a community that way. Is this a moment right now to try to find those communities or somehow create, you know, in terms of helping with the caregiving side? Is there a way to use community
Yes. Absolutely. And I think one of the things that's so important if you're a new mom or if you're a caregiver of, you know, medically complicated children or adults, you know, your own parents, community is so important. And it can feel like a burden to say, well, let me hop on the Zoom call with these other people. But actually, in the long run, it's something that ends up being very fulfilling and fills your tank because you meet with other people who are going through exactly the same situation at the same time. And for me, this is something in my practice in Washington, D.C., there's actually a program called the PACE support groups. And during the pandemic, it all moved online and it's virtual, right? And so it's interesting because my patients initially last year were all kind of like, yeah, I don't know if I should sign up though. Like, it's virtual, it's not going to be as great, it's not in person. and it was still awesome. It was still wonderful. And so, you know, that's something that I think over the course of this pandemic, we have seen as a silver lining, that there's all these new communities as well, whether that's on Instagram or Facebook. I mean, I know obviously there's a lot that's wrong with social media, but there's still a lot of really good connection that you can get there. And actually my company, Gemma, is doing women's mental health education virtually. So I think that this is a space that we're kind of seeing a lot more coming out in terms of how can you get the community, the education, the support that women really need, and that it's hard to find on your own. So there's these little pockets that are coming up everywhere.
Well, even just this Campfire chat program, right, is building a community. Deborah, there's another question that somebody asked about retirees specifically. So if you're a retiree and you're caregiving for ill spouse or parents, and this person says, I resent having to leave my job, even though I love these people.
Yeah, very, very difficult. It's, you know, there are so many individuals right now who are in the space of having to do the caregiving work that maybe they would have considered hiring someone to come into their home to help take care of their loved ones. But because of the pandemic, you don't want to bring strangers into your home. So I think there are many women who have had to give up their careers, walked away from their jobs because they have to, on all sides of the spectrum. You have your kids are super young, your kids are school aged, they're middle school, you have to be their teacher. You have elderly parents who need to be taken to the doctor, they need to be cared for, they need help with their you know, daily living activities, with their cooking, things like that. And you don't want to bring somebody into the house that may not be 100% safe for those vulnerable populations. So how do you manage that, plus your own job, plus taking care of yourself? And the fact is, sometimes you have to make a choice, and not feeling guilty about that choice, and not feeling guilty about those feelings of resentment. They are normal, they are expected, and it's okay. The key is finding ways to manage those emotions in a way that is healthy for everybody. If you're feeling those feelings, you may be experiencing some burnout, so it might be worth finding somebody to talk to. You know, there is availability out there, even if you aren't working. Maybe your significant other has insurance, or maybe you're working through Medicaid. All of those have really good access to therapists. You can even use, you know, your EAP benefits, employee assistance benefits, right, to get a few sessions, just a few sessions, to work through some of those feelings, understand them better, and figure out a plan to channel those in a positive way.
A couple other questions that are coming in that are really interesting. One says, we've been in fight or flight for so long now, and then they say, how do we come down from this safely, right? We've been at this like heightened level, and now maybe things are getting a little better. The news every night is better and better. How do we come down?
I just want to definitely normalize that, first of all. If you're experiencing that, you are not alone. It's actually normal, and your body is working correctly. You know, for so long, we are saying something's really scary. There is a threat out there. Wear a mask, wear a mask. And now someone's telling you, take the mask off. If you're having trouble sort of acclimate to whatever the situation is now, which is, you know, if you're vaccinated, take your mask off, there's no longer a threat. And you're having trouble with that. I mean, I know I am. I'm fully vaccinated, and I'm wearing a mask outside, and my husband is his come down has been a little more quick than mine. We take a walk and there's no one really else around, and he's comfortable taking his mask off, and I'm slow to that. I'm just not there yet. I'm almost there. But I think really just normalizing the experience. Hey, we've never gone through this before, any part of it. Even now, the part we're in, like all of it. And so really, there's never a time where it's going to be wrong for your first line of defense with being self-compassion. Try and have that be your first line of defense for anything that you're going through. You know, just meeting yourself where you're at and understanding that you are not alone. And so that's why I think being transparent and having conversations like this are so important. You know, just when Deborah was talking, I was thinking about this is what I do for a living. Like, this is what I went to school for many, many years. This is what I have my doctorate on. This is what all my clinical hours are on. And I'm just remembering all the times during this time I've literally said, I have to quit my job. Like, there's no other way. There's nothing. There's nothing. I've reached my point of burnout. That's it. Like, I've been on the verge of something multiple times. And really, in my mind at that time, the only thing that seemed like a possibility for me, a solution, was to quit my job, even though it brings me so much joy. And I was able then to take that 3 minutes and maybe just take a walk outside, because for me, being outside really helps. And just like what Pooja said, we can't come up with solutions when we're in fight or flight. So whatever you can do in that moment, after you've given yourself self-compassion, and like I said, even if it's a minute, 30 seconds, 60 seconds, move, turn on some music, whatever works for you. When I am able to do that, I'm able to see a whole host of other solutions, because the problem solving part of our brain, the executive functioning, starts to kick in when we're a little more calm or we're experiencing a positive mood. So I think, it's normal, that question. A lot of people are going through it. I'm going through it. I'm the first to say I'm transparent about it. And my anxiety levels have really risen over the last year, and my come down from little things that send me into fight or flight. Like, when I think something dangerous is happening around me or in my neighborhood and my heart starts to beat, I've noticed over this past year that my come down from that, when I realize it's not a threat, it takes a really long time for me.
Yeah.
I think that everybody I was going to say, I think everyone has a little bit of a different method in terms of coming back into the world, and there's no right way to do it. So for some folks, it's going to be just ripping the Band-Aid off and going back into, shopping at Target or whatever it is. And that feels good to just get back out there. And then for other folks, they're going to want to take baby steps, and that feels safer. So I think just kind of honoring for you what your process is, and recognizing that there's going to be a spectrum, I think, for everybody.
I was going to say, I felt anxious when I went the first time back into our studio, and my mind was like, you're fine. But physically, my heart was racing. It's amazing how physical it is. Question, Pooja, you contribute to the New York Times. They did this big article recently about languishing, and how many of us are, it's a kind of coined a new term, languishing right now. And someone asks what you all think about that, and how does one emerge from languishing?
Yeah, I thought that was a great piece. I mean, I feel like, there's so many different terms that are coming out right now. And when we're thinking about sort of like wellness, and what does it mean? What does it mean to get kind of back to better, or back to where we were? I think, first of all, let's just all be honest in the fact that there were plenty of people that were feeling pretty bad even before the pandemic. And there were plenty of populations that were really struggling before the pandemic. And those folks are still having a really hard time. So I think that, to me, it keeps coming back to this kind of idea of values and priorities. And there's a way where the pandemic, I think, for some folks has clarified and really honed in what is super important to me, what is super important to my family. And so as we're looking at this next stage, where maybe people are recognizing you're coming out of fight or flight, and you're actually recognizing what a trauma it was that we all went through this past year. Because when you're in fight or flight, you don't have the space, the mental bandwidth to actually acknowledge how bad it is. So now you're seeing that, and you might be somebody who's saying, okay, now it's time to get help, actually. Maybe now it's time to go to therapy, finally. Maybe I've been thinking about it, or kind of, thrown around, and now's actually the time to take that step. Or maybe it's the time to kind of really look at some of the things that happened during the pandemic actually worked for us. And I want to keep some of those things in my life. I want to be able to have a more flexible job. I don't want to travel as much. How can I incorporate that in going forward? So I guess to get over the languishing is to really kind of look at, how do I dig into the meaning of what happened over this past year for me, and what do I pull out from that?
There's a couple more questions that are so good, and I know we're getting short on time. So Deborah, someone says, even women who are not currently working have difficulty setting a schedule or routine because they're not used to being unemployed. How can we set a routine? There's no normal routine, no usual friends or a manager to confide in.
Absolutely. You know, and right now you just have all the open time in front of you. The whole day is open. Um, so, you know, if you have that open time in front of you, you know, I'll go back to what Pooja was just saying. What is that meaning for you? What gives you meaning? What are your goals? And start each day figuring out what can you do today that will bring you one step closer to the things that really matter to you, whatever that is. And say yes to those things and find them, seek them out, fit them into your day, and then say no to the things that haven't been working for you in the past. Really, if you have a wide open schedule and you're out of work right now, that's an incredibly difficult situation and very, very stressful. And at the same time, it's an opportunity to rethink and reconsider where you are and where you want to be and where you want to head. So moving forward intentionally, and intentionally finding whether it be the education that will be helpful for you to change course or whatever it is. I think that would be the key to having a maybe not a routine, but a meaning every day, a sense of meaning every day to get up, to do something that really matters to you and to your family and propels you forward.
There's one more really interesting comment. We've talked so much about mothers and children, and someone says, what if you don't have children? In her situation, she's dealing with a lot right now, chronic illness, anxiety, depression. Her coworkers don't know this. And she says it can be an assumption that women without children don't have the same work-life, she uses the B word, balanced needs. But sometimes she says it feels like a competition for who's the most burnt out, with all the parents talking about that. So how do you find your voice if you're one who doesn't have children, but you have a lot of need, you have your own needs?
This is actually such a great point. I just wanted to touch on for a really little second, and then I think I would let someone else talk about it, because obviously personally I do. But I think that it's this whole culture where we as a society sort of, number one, you hit it on the head with that question. We try sometimes to see who's got it worse. And then on another end of that, we sort of have to disregard our own feelings because the situation is always worse for somebody else. And that positioning is actually a really big part of toxic positivity, that it could be worse. Comment where I think people have great intentions to sort of help you feel better, and they're coming from a good place, and their response is like, well, it could be worse. But that's actually like, it's a very detrimental thing to say, because it's basically telling you and sort of reinforcing in your own self that your feelings and your struggles are not valid, and they're not big enough for you to even talk about or to seek support for, which is completely incorrect. You know, it just goes back to that idea of knowing that you're worth it. Your struggles, just like your work is valuable, your struggles have a value. They're valid. They you know, are authentic and sincere. And whatever your truth is, and your emotion is, and whatever you're going through is no less than someone else's, because it's a different circumstance or situation. Like, that is true for you. And so finding people that you trust in your life. You know, I like to call it taking a network sweep, but like, who are the people in your life that you actually can talk to and be supported by? And if they aren't the people that you are in proximity with or spending your energy and time with, then this is also a good time to sort of come up with some different people in your life and seek that out, whether it's, you know, a trustworthy person that's professional, or a family member, or a friend, or a new friend, and really joining in on some of those communities, because the truth of the matter is you're not alone. And so really using what we have at our disposal right now, which, like Pooja said, oftentimes, you know, social media and connecting virtually has its negatives for sure. But one of the positives that's really come out from all this is that you can always find people or a group that are going through something you're going through. And, you know, you're worth it enough to seek that out, and you're your struggles are absolutely valid no matter what. And that's a good lesson to sort of, that would be a good thing to learn from this last year, a point of resiliency to take with you into the rest of your life.
They're telling me that our time is up. I was gonna just say, I don't know if we have time, but could we do one sentence that gives you hope? Just in one sentence, like what is giving you hope, to end on a positive note here. We'll start Pooja, then Deborah, then Deepika.
Well, the fact that all four of us are here together in this room gives me a tremendous amount of hope.
For me, it is that I feel like the culture is shifting, that there is a new recognition, a real and a deep recognition of the value of women and their traditional, non-traditional home work.
Yeah, I would echo in saying that the fact that these type of conversations are becoming more and more normal, and you can reach them and be a part of them in a very inclusive way and accessible, gives me a lot of hope. If it was a motto, I would say that nothing is permanent. I really like that one. It's true. And when I'm in a situation that doesn't feel good, I know it's not going to last forever, and that helps.
The warm weather, the sun is giving me hope right now too. I want to thank everyone so much for being with us, and all of you for watching at home. Dr. Deepika Chopra, Dr. Pooja Lakshmi, Dr. Deborah Fernandez-Turner, you guys are terrific. You women are terrific. Thank you so much for giving us such tangible tips too. It's really helpful.
Thank you to you, Kate. You're an amazing moderator. It's not easy.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been a great forum.
And thank you again to Aetna for their support of Girl Scouts in this important issue. And thank you everyone for inviting the Girl Scout Network into your homes. We hope you've enjoyed this time together. As you know, Girl Scouts is a nonprofit and the largest girl serving organization in the world. In March 2020, to a remote model, allowing girls to continue to learn, grow as leaders, and connect with each other. During a time when so many life events were canceled, Girl Scouts remained a source of community for many members. The result, for some families, Girl Scouts was an life raft in a stormy year. If you believe in our mission of developing the next generation of leaders, we hope you'll consider becoming a lifetime member. This $400 tax-deductible donation, $200 if you're an alum under the age of 30, includes a variety of benefits and discounts, including invitations to special events and 20% off from select female-founded startups until March 2022. It's never been a better time. Sign up before June 10th, and you'll also get a tote bag to show the world your support. Best of all, $25 of your dues automatically fund a year of Girl Scouting for a girl in an underserved community in your area. Since January 2019, this has resulted in more than 28,000 girls being involved in Girl Scouts whose families would not otherwise have been able to afford the cost. Thank you again for joining us this evening.